Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Ramesh Kumar Mishra. He is a cognitive scientist from the University of Hyderabad. He heads the School of Medical Sciences. He was earlier head of the Center for Neural and Cognitive Sciences. He is a prolific author. His research interests range from attention, action control, perception, bilingualism, how they affect brain, etc. But cognitive sciences is a multidisciplinary thing. I mean, you have biology, you have philosophy, you have linguistics, you have neuroscience, and you now have artificial intelligence. So he is the right person to talk to about how now, given the latest technological advancements, particularly in artificial intelligence, and even if you take into account the mental health issues, whatever, the world is changing fast. In the next 5 to 10 years, I don't think the world will change, not the same world. I mean, we will not be living in the same world as we know it in 5 to 10 years. I think so. So, the reason for inviting him is to learn about these frontiers of science and then to inform our readers also and our viewers also, because this is a big thing that is happening which people are paying attention to but not in the mainstream. So thank you, sir, for graciously accepting our invite. Let me start with the first question. As I earlier referred to before, I was watching this podcast of Donald Hoffman on Lex Friedman. He wrote a book called The Case Against Reality. What you see is not real. He specialized in evolutionary psychology. So consciousness is a big part of it. If what we are seeing is not real, I mean, how? Then what is? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very pleased to be talking to all of you, a very distinguished newspaper of this country. I do remember reading it when I was a student at University of Delhi, but later with the digitization, I moved on to some other newspapers, but Indian Express, the Hindu still remain a point of good reference. So yeah, I mean, let me come to the I must appreciate it's a very good initiative of Indian Express to put it in multiple formats. I checked out some of the earlier episodes, particularly the one with the Professor Murthy and etc. So yeah, cognitive science is certainly not that new in India, but it's making good ground now with many IITs and central universities offering courses. And I have been active in cognitive science, teaching these courses for about 15 years now. My earlier stint was at India's first cognitive science center at University of Allahabad. So I taught for 5 years there and did some empirical work. Then I moved to University of Hyderabad, which had opened a center in 2009.
You did your PhD in linguistics.
I did. So my background is from linguistics, but I studied psycholinguistics at University of Delhi. So I got interested in the biological aspects of language processing, and then I went to the south as a research assistant in the early days and worked first at the Central Institute of Indian Languages, and then quickly moved to All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, which was an adjacent institute. So that exposure got my mind changed towards more clinical side of things. So I got introduced to language cognitive disorders, and I taught courses also at that time. So this was a very new thing for me, because in Delhi we were only taught courses, but I was actively then participating in the therapy processes. So I actually served there for 4 years. So that taught me that linguistics is just not a theoretical field. And by that time, I heard from someone, National Brain Research Center had come up in Manesar, Gurgaon, and I had completed my PhD. So I moved there to do a postdoc, and they were gracious enough to accept me because, as you know, NBRC was primarily created to be a biological neuroscience institute. So a linguistic person coming in there, I had to defend, and I did some work with Professor Nandini Chatterjee Singh, who now is a well-known, I think it's a director at UN. So then I went to Europe. So in Europe, I got exposed to cognitive science.
You had a scholarship also.
Yeah, so I was one of the early recipients of Erasmus Mundus scholarship, and that got me exposed or offered me a good opportunity. So I first heard about cognitive science in Germany, Potsdam, because before that there was no concept of cognitive science. I was knowing clinical linguistics, neurolinguistics, speech and hearing pathology, but not cognitive science. Interestingly, I spent 2 years about there, and I got exposure to the empirical side of studying the mind, because you just could read books. Like I had read linguistics, philosophy, Chomsky, but then I didn't know that this is a field in Europe almost exploding. So both neuroscience and cognitive science. So I moved around Europe, and I checked into many labs, and I came to know that you can study empirically with brain waves and eye tracking. So I picked up some of these ideas, but I was not sure that I would, in which direction I would go. Again, luck struck, and I got a email from Professor Nandini saying that, okay, there is an institute, cognitive science in Allahabad. Do you know? If you want a job, then quickly apply, because they may fill up somebody. And I didn't know what Allahabad. I only used to know that it's a older classical university. So I did apply, and then I came and joined, and it opened my eyes completely, because there were psychologists, there were neuroscientists, there were philosophers, and so multidisciplinarity was unfolding. So I had to create new courses, because I just could not teach theoretical linguistics for the MSc cognitive science students. So I took the challenge. I started learning attention. I started learning about cognitive processes. I guided students. So it formally introduced me to the teaching, learning syllabuses, guiding research students in cognitive science. And as I told you, after few years there, I moved to University of Hyderabad, and I have been here ever since. And I became a professor, and then I am now the dean of the school, and many things have happened. So I came to Hyderabad in 2013, and it is almost more than a decade. So my exposure to cognitive science actually has been multidisciplinary and checkered. So I always say that if you do not have a multidisciplinary by accident or by your own will, you cannot be a cognitive scientist, because it is not for such people who have come in from A and want to do A plus. So I had, let's say, linguistics. I had exposure to speech and hearing pathology. I went to NBRC, got introduced to biological side of neuroscience. So I went to Europe, got exposed to, and then all that knowledge was helpful when I created courses, and I started guiding students and published articles and papers. They were not in the fields in which I actually had got my degrees. So interestingly, the very definition of cognitive science is this. For example, let me tell you, we still take students with no proper background. Like you can enter cognitive science to do masters and PhD almost from any background. You cannot do that in traditional fields, because we don't believe that you need to really study a particular subject to study the mind, because it is intuitively present in all of us, and all of us can study the mind. Albeit you should be interested in learning scientific techniques, you should be interested in philosophy, you should be interested in social sciences, also humanities. So you should essentially be a person with a broad mindset. I think I probably had that in me, or situations that came or accidents that occurred made me like that. I cannot now reflect back, but I am liking it. So
I think these sciences, I mean, most of them are isolated, but they converge, all of them converge together in cognitive science. I think which is the right approach.
Because in the 60s in America, when cognitive science so-called revolution happened, computer scientists, AI researchers, neuroscientists, biologists, everybody contributed. And you could read also popular books on the cognitive revolution. Um, why that was necessary? Because traditional fields had failed in order to deliver the contemporary demands. Because human beings or scholars, human beings particularly, had come out of the Second World War. Now, more stark realities of the world was there. A lot of political upheavals, predicted models had failed, communism had failed, and people experienced a lot of liberal democracies in the Western countries. So I would say they did not want a mechanical model of the mind. So behaviorism got failed. So lots of new revolutionary ideas were brought forward, and in the meeting that Chomsky and many other like-minded people did a meeting with the foundation, the Sloan Foundation support. Um, they created this field. So they put down that this field will be multidisciplinary. We would pursue, interestingly, both metaphysical questions and empirical questions. So it was not only empirical. So I always say that if you think cognitive science is a true science, you are mistaken. It's not a true science in the sense that you understand science. So here you have to be a philosopher who also is interested in doing experiments. It's not other way around. So therefore, most people who come from traditional sciences, they somewhere feel a bit uncomfortable. Either they become reductionist, I see many, or if they are capable, they also get into the true spirit of cognitive science, because you cannot understand, as forefathers imagined. Forefathers means those who started the cognitive revolution. They certainly knew that the question of the mind is a metaphysical question for humanity. It cannot be nailed down to the mechanical, physical models that we already know. But you have to, for the sake of science, you have to consider the mechanical models. Otherwise, it would be a bit ridiculous, because we cannot look like we are in 13th century. So we have to maintain the scientific, post-enlightenment scientific spirit, but the questions are as ancient as anybody is. Therefore, reading the Greek philosophers is important. Reading, as you can see in India now, Indian knowledge system, traditional revivalism is underway. That is very important. But you have to learn modern techniques like brain imaging, computational tools, uh, other forms of data collection. But your research questions just cannot be so reductive, because there is no such thing. So again, next question will be begged whether studying the brain is studying cognitive science. The clear answer is no. Because you can be a neurophysiologist without any concern, metaphysical concern for the mind or consciousness. Many people are there. They're doing very well.
From your research,
What exactly is the mind? And you have this neuro MRIs in neuroscience.
Yeah.
So for every thought, there is a certain variation in the neurons or whatever. I mean, for every action that we do. So where does this fit in terms of cognitive science? What is the mind and how do you define it?
Now I will say what generally is understood in the field. Philosophers of mind define the mind differently, depending on their persuasion. Analytic philosophers, phenomenologists, cognitive scientists, post 60s, at least in America, have assumed the mind to be a collection of algorithms, computer programs that make things happen, that connect things to the outside world, to the experience of the person. So it's a computational algorithm, collection of programs. This is a purely computational view.
from experience, from our
Visual experience in the world, we get certain thoughts, I mean, certain memory and everything. So that they term as an algorithm.
They say that without the algorithm, we will never know what is reality, because our assumption of reality is based on the products of the algorithm. Alright, so this is the dominant view. So you can find now the biological base to this, because the algorithm has to run on a base. Now comes the brain. So brain is making the mind happen, and mind, you can say, is an emergent property of the brain. This is the mainstream view. Now my view is that this could be right, this could be utterly wrong. Because even though we know the brain mechanics, much of it is known, we still cannot define mind. If we say it's a collection of computer programs, it looks very false, because it is dominated by the computer metaphor. If computer revolution itself would not have happened in America in 50s, we would not have the metaphor. Please go back to the origin of the metaphor. Now we know the limitations of the computer, so why hold on to that metaphor? So I don't subscribe fully to that view. I hold that mind is a metaphysical concept, like many other abstract concepts are there. But we still have to go a long way to fully mechanize it or operationalize it. Now the elephant in the room is how in different cultures people have defined the mind. You cannot have a universal abstract theory of the mind. So cultural neurosciences, cultural cognitive science, actually I happen to be the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Cultural Cognitive Science in Springer. So that journal we started with the spirit that we will first learn what are the belief systems pertaining to the mind in different cultures. Because this computational idea, biological idea, they are clearly Western ideas. We have not done any research to claim. So now why not look at our civilizations, our cultures, including the Japanese, the Chinese, and various other belief systems, how mind has been visualized. Particularly the Hindu traditional Hindu philosophical systems, Sankhya, Nyaya, and Yoga philosophies have not defined mind in this way, because the self and the cosmos do connect. So there is a larger ambition to merely processing the reality in our, but nowhere in the Western tradition this has been considered. So now this revivalism is justified, and this revivalism is underway. So according to me, brain functions are to be clearly deciphered, because we can do technological things with that. Like AI neuroscience interface is possible with that. So you need not bother with metaphysics when you are looking at those things. But the pure concern for the mind is certainly metaphysical. Even it is possible that we may not have to look at the brain even for that. But that would be a big challenge. I know a lot of people would feel
But they're so interconnected.
they're interconnected. That is why we call neural cognitive science. That is why we teach students neuroscience. We teach students philosophy of mind. Let them be well versed with different traditions. Let them not pursue only the biological computational model. They could just be tools.
Just to break it down.
Yeah.
So you mean to say that mind is completely independent? It can be studied independently of the brain.
Okay, let me put it in this way. See, we will not come to an end. We know what is brain because it's material, physical. It has certain attributes that modern science can throw light on, but we will never know how to define mind. It is a quality. It's a concept. It's a hypothesis about the entire thing, right? So let me give you an example from philosophy of mind. We have panpsychism as a branch of philosophy of mind which is growing now. The panpsychists believe that everything is conscious. It's a very radical proposal. The universe itself is conscious. So we are merely accidentally happening to find ourselves here. So we cannot claim that consciousness is generated in our central nervous system, and we are the judge of everyone. So panpsychists hold the view that everything is conscious. There is some truth in thinking so, because we just could be falsely arrogant. That consciousness is emerging from here. If everything is conscious, then the idea of mind is more broader or mental, right? As Descartes would have divided it. So we don't have to really always look at ourselves or creatures that have nervous system like us to define consciousness.
Right? There is one
Biologist, Mike Levin, I think.
Mike Levin, yeah.
Yeah, he said that even microbes, bacteria also are also conscious. They may not have neurons, but
The argument is that as lower you go in the animal order, I have written actually a couple of books, and I have been very much interested in the evolution of cognition. So there I have addressed questions like why cognition evolved, and why particularly sophisticated type of consciousness we display evolved. What could be its purpose? Because I have written that actually it doesn't give us much except the pain, like phenomenality, subjectivity. If it is causing so much of psychiatric illness, so much of pain, so much of unnecessary, why should we have it? Why evolution preferred it? Because if you look at standard theories of evolution, nothing that is of any help is preferred and maintained in the species. So there is no answer to that. So seems like, as some philosophers now argue, animals are saved. They are in the world, with the world. We are not. Oh, terrible idea. We are not in the world? No. We have been cursed to observe the world, to pass judgments, but we are not in the world grounded. Animals are in the world grounded. It's a powerful argument. So, holding this view, this hierarchical view of human beings having the best possible type of consciousness is fine, but it is not answering the question, like why consciousness arose. But what you asked, whether animals with low number of neurons, and many experiments have happened, or the primates who are sharing a lot of genetic stuff with us, to what extent they have empathy and awareness. Some studies, ethological studies would say they do have, like they do display some of the key features of consciousness, but they may not have the same attributes of consciousness, because we are achieving so much with the knowledge states that consciousness gives. Animals have not been, but in their world, from their point of view, as the philosopher Thomas Nagel would say, we will never know what a bat thinks unless we are bats. I go by him. So we have been probably more arrogant considering our successes at the cost of the planet and other people, other animals, of course, because we are defending ourselves. They are not here. They are not defending themselves. So there would not be a possibility for me to really know how a dog or an animal or a bat is experiencing its own consciousness with regard to its own members of the species and the planet. What are its views? Because it's always from my point of view. So I think we cannot enter into that debate, except a lot of scholars are now talking about animal consciousness. So there is a hierarchical evolutionary model that things must have started like simple, and we are the sort of like whatever we are displaying now, AI is at the zenith of it. Very, very tough, because it's like we have had enough with our intelligence and we want something different.
But is it possible when we don't know ourselves? I mean, as you said, mind, nobody can define it. Now they are trying to mimic the mind practically. That is artificial intelligence. Not just mimic the mind, but to go beyond the mind.
Well, I'm partially in agreement with you because that's the way people are writing about it. But if you have read in New York Times or if you have heard Jeffrey Hinton, the suspicion and the fear he was.
Yes.
I mean, he got Nobel Award for that, but he's expressing a lot of ethical suspicion. He
It's
says
already conscious.
he says that it's already about to, like, the danger is there. But the question is whether AI displays anything like mind. More recent debates are that nothing, certainly. AI is mimicking whatever is fed to it. AI doesn't have those key properties like John Searle or other philosophers would contest, that it doesn't have intentionality, it doesn't experience things, it doesn't generate problems of its own. So those traditional complaints. But then technologists would say that, wait, they would generate some of this in their own manner, and we will not even know that they are capable of. So that always remains a fear. But the philosophical argument is that does a computer program have a mind of its own? The answer clearly as of now is no. It's a computational tool. It massively can process data. It can tell you really what we want to know, but it's using the knowledge system that humans have created. So like in DeepSeek, the argument now is whether DeepSeek is better than Gemini or each is trying to kind of add those attributes so as to make it more lucrative. But then there are more ethical issues now. So more recently, ethical committees have been formed, and a very prominent philosopher of mind, Thomas Metzinger, maybe a couple of years ago, was leading the ethic at the EU level, ethical aspects of AI. So the question is, to what extent we allow them to mimic us? Like, if they can talk to us like we want, then our connection with human beings will be limited and a lot of problems will happen. They can at best be nice, informative computational tools. They can help me out plan my trip and tell me, instant knowledge, because search engines are not that good. But if you ask AI, for example, tell me what are the nice philosophy of mind books written by Indians in the last 10 years, maybe you get a better reply now on ChatGPT than on Google Scholar. This is nice, helpful. So it can initiate quickly like a nice teacher. But then it is up to you to judge. So AI has to be judged. Even human beings have to be evaluative. The affective domain questions remains a concept because people are getting addicted. So more recently, this is where the concern is, that if people get addicted, they will not like humans. There will be less interaction. So there will be other problems than merely computational support. So as of now, my opinion is that we have to see the real problems, and particularly countries like India and China, they have to, because they are the ones who would carry it out. So they really have to wage wars on both fronts, the effect of AI and money that comes through AI. So we have to be very sensitive.
You're also on the editorial board of a journal of artificial intelligence.
Yes, I am there.
So what does it deal with them in general?
In this journal, we are open to philosophical, computational, bioinformatics, philosophy of psycholinguistic aspects of AI, and we tackle various papers pertaining to multiple fields. It's a multidisciplinary journal. So I am a member of the editorial board. It has many other distinguished people in the board. So I, time to time, review papers in my areas. So yeah.
Not everyone would have thought or about consciousness, the difference between, say, mind and the brain. So certain things that you have spoken might not be intelligible to them. So if you can, I think if you can just summarize the hard problem of consciousness and the inner life, I think that then it might be.
All right.
Is it at the cutting edge of?
Was many years ago by Chalmers. The main problem is how you can have mind and consciousness in a material universe. The universe is material, our body is material. So how can you have something so subjective?
Sorry, mind and
Consciousness are both different, right?
Consciousness is an attribute of mind. Those agents who claim to have a mind would have consciousness or self-consciousness.
And the mind is not an emergent quality of consciousness, no? Right.
Consciousness is one defining characteristic of some people, some agents who claim to have minds of mentality. Intentionality is there, empathy is there, objective knowledge is there. So all these are attributes. Mind is a formal tag used by specialized people and lay people to define collection of subjective functions, not merely one. But consciousness, as it's studied in these multidisciplinary fields, is a very well defined problem. But there are debates on it. What is it? As he pointed out, David Chalmers made it a popular problem, saying, no way we can ever explain subjectivity in the material universe, because it is impossible. Because we cannot accept dualism. In a monotheism or monism, that is the modern scientific world, we have to look at what we can see, touch, experiment. Mind we cannot, consciousness we cannot. But the thing is that we are phenomenal creatures. We are experiencing things beyond cognition. For example, you can focus your attention on it and tell me it's a mobile phone, but there is a subjective experience. Apples are good. I used to own one. These statements are popping up in your mind. There was no need, if your mind would have evolved just to tackle objective knowledge, this phenomenal scenes would pop up. So if human beings are experiencing more than what is available, this is unique to them. So this phenomenality is not certainly materially observable, but it is somewhere arising from some interaction. Now the main question is, how do you keep the scientific ideas, the brain and its workings, on which you have some hold, and the phenomenality, subjectivity, that is essentially a feature of those who are conscious. So Ned Block, another prominent American philosopher, proposed a bifurcation. Let's have access and phenomenal consciousness. It was a very smart move. Access consciousness is finding out properties of things, like a computer can do, like computer vision, like this is it. Yeah. Phenomenality is everything else on it, topping it off. The problem is not with access. The problem is with access plus phenomenality. And this has bothered everybody since time immemorial. We are merely formalizing the problems. Even to some extent, Patricia and Paul Churchland, American, they called a branch neurophilosophy. What that means is that we will not bother about phenomenality. We are in a scientific age. Neuroscience, biology are the disciplines. There is no need to talk about this. This is folk psychology, Jerry Fodor. Lots of people. I have written and spoken about it. So those who did their PhD in America in the 70s, 80s, they have gone through all of this. That on one hand, they would shout about Vietnam War and people killing and all kinds of problems. On the other hand, they would expect an extremely material, extremely reductive theory of mind. This duality we cannot understand, because at least in our cultures we did not show that kind of monism tendency. So we have been dualists ever since. I will come to that if you ask me a question. Where are we now? So this subjectivity has eluded scientific scalpel because that is its nature. You cannot trap it. So if you cut open the brain, you study the brain images, there is nowhere you will find a center of consciousness. Like Descartes thought he was roaming around in the streets of Netherlands and was trying to find out where does the conscious self lies, and he found out maybe a pineal gland or one gland, but that was his way of just telling, at least he thought so, that I can find some base to my self, because he was worried about, he was an empirical minded person, and his first meditation is a powerful book. So I think the question of consciousness, be it Chalmers, be it Ned Block, be it even some of these philosophers in the Indian traditions, is this tug of war between how to explain the invisible vis-a-vis what we are certain about. We are certain about the materiality of the universe, but then panpsychism and more AI even, they are again, they're pushing the goalpost. It's quite possible that even the AI would have subjectivity.
How?
Why not? Because if you are positioning the AI as a collection of programs, and AI has all the knowledges, just the way we have access consciousness, so right now it has access, it would add phenomenality to it with experience. You cannot not postulate that. That is where the danger lies. That it is not only telling me some information, it is knowing me and generating subjective opinion about me. How do we stop it? I don't think there's an answer to it. Maybe you stop at the level of programming itself and the kind of input. But the thing is that the input that it has already taken When we are sleeping, it's working on it. You are not switching them off. So the question of AI is pushing the phenomenality, uh, materiality dichotomy even further. So I think we should not debate conceptually to define what is mind. We should either talk about its functionality, at least for most major issues, and what neuroscience can tell us, and we are solidly at it in multiple laboratories. And we have to talk about ethical issues, those who are not participating in the debate but will tomorrow will be somehow affected with the decisions taken in this debate, because large bodies of people in the world are unaware that these kind of things are getting debated. So we have to include them. We have to be culturally sensitive, because I have said in the beginning, different traditions have had different views about mind, body, the world, and nature of dualism, and nature of cosmos and nature of the universe, particularly the Hindus or the Indian philosophical, the 6 Indian philosophical systems have all we are now getting to that. So I think, yeah, we are not in a mess, but we have to take a decision. It will take a lot of time. So as a cognitive scientist, I just can't tell you that study the brain, you will find your answers about mind. I will say that please get acquainted with all these complicated things. So that
Scientist has also to study philosophy now.
100%. Because if that's why people get it wrong. When I teach students cognitive revolution, the textbook history is okay, behaviorism in psychology was bad, and people started AI and computer science, and pure, our knowledge about the brains increased in the 70s because of new methods. But that's, I think, not the actual. A moment in evolution of the brain came when the brain wanted to understand itself. We are merely manifesting it. So let's forget our agency. Look at it from a very abstract point of view. Is the brain who is trying to understand itself? So that would be a $1,000,000 question, of course. It can't be so simple. That's why the question is why we should be phenomenal and subjective where there is no need. Because a lot of problems are because of it. And most animals don't have that. That's why they are grounded. They are here and now. I have to be here and now following meditation, and that's the entire stress, like be present. So what would have happened if I would not have had subjectivity and phenomenality? I would have been present anyway. Right now I have to force myself to be present. So
So I've always been very curious about this fact about is intelligence something that's inherited?
Intelligence is defined often as, well, people don't use the word intelligence now in the manner in which people were using many. Now we talk of fluid intelligence. All organisms are intelligent. So what is intelligence? If I have to intelligence is the organism's ability to confront the challenges or the contingencies of the environment so as to survive. It's a tool. But we humans talk about have used intelligence for creating a hierarchy. Often it has been misused as well. So now everyone has some sort of adaptive ability. That is that organism's response to the environment. Now it involves learning. You might be so-called intelligent, but if you stop learning, you will not be able to adopt. We're talking about the problems of AI. A lot of us would have different views, because some people would adopt, others would not adopt. So intelligence per se is nothing but a concept, and we still do not know if it has clear neural basis, because we are studying brain networks. Scientists, we are not saying somewhere, of course it is linked to attributes, but we don't say if these networks are so good or prolific, you are very intelligent and there is a predictive model. Market would like to exploit it, but as a scientist or scholar, we are not yet there. So I define even cognition as a tool that helps me to adapt as best as I can to the demands, everyday demands of the environment. That's my cognition. It is not a frozen concept. So learning is a key element in that. Adaptability is a key element in that, and also social cultural forces, because we don't operate in isolation. We are part of a large network of minds and brains. So we need to be adapting to others' needs also, because in so my intelligence is nothing actually if it is not valued by members of my community, right?
So like standardized tests like IQ tests, then which define what's your opinion on this?
My opinion is firmly it is no more it is relevant to, because it has created all the racism, it has created all the problem. Now what IQ are we talking about? So on the one hand you would talk about DYI, and on the other hand you would talk about IQ. So the question is that we have to have some broader view about human competence as far as cultures are concerned. Otherwise we would look pretty much contradicted ourselves. So if you start measuring and admitting people based on their IQ and you want to be inclusive, that cannot be done. So I think the tests, anyway, psychologists have been questioning it. It is not that I'm saying something new, but more is coming as we are knowing about the brains. Because psychological tests developed out of qualitative judgments. But now we are talking about the brains. So brain science is enlightening whether testing should happen or not. But legacy of psychology is still there, so it's not going to be out soon. But for example, cognitive psychology doesn't talk about IQ or testing. Evolutionary psychology doesn't talk about IQ testing. It's only educates some of the older remnants. So in top universities and institutes, they are slightly being the newer ideas are coming in. So there is nothing like, well, fluid intelligence is something, but fluid intelligence is a cognitive psychological concept consisting of attention and working memory. There I'm not giving you a number. If brain is a computational system, like you have, let's say, Apple or another computer, they may be different with regard to the processing speed or the memory. So with regard to the human brains, maybe because of biological, genetic, cultural regions, some people come up with stronger or quicker adaptive possibilities. That's what you can say. That's why you see some people adapting to challenges sooner than other people. But that has nothing to do, like, it's not a category. If you train yourself very well, for example, the kind of fears that I see about AI, let's say that human beings have to adopt and use AI to their benefit. Well, those who are adopting or who learn the courses and whatever training, they would be really fine with AI. I mean, it's not that they would have any trouble. But those who fail to adopt, they would obviously describe it as a threat. So government policies just can't be based on number of threats we are presuming. We have to also look at what science is saying. So I think adaptability is a better concept than talking about a frozen concept like AI as a biomarker. So I think we are in a very fluid situation now, and anybody can become adaptive, following the tricks and using AI and going around the world, and there's nothing stopping really people. All the information is available at your fingertips and which you never had. So you don't need to seek permission to do anything. So you can just enhance your adaptive competence rather than if your teacher told you that, oh, you see now your AI was not that good. I mean that's not what it is. Anyway.
Coming to the practical side of this science, we see, I read your thoughts on Anthony Bourdain, the chef
who committed suicide.
Bourdain, yeah.
So we see that many in our own society, be it students or maybe other people, either they commit suicide or you see a rampant, very irrational kind of behavior. So many crimes are happening. I mean, what is it? What prompts them? As a scientist, what would you say? Is it because of certain things in the brain, or is it because of their other thing, the so-called mind?
There are psychological theories on it. That when you decide to finish your life, the most precious thing that you have, but cognitive scientists as such have not been studying, because we have clinical psychologists looking at it directly. We have epidemiological data. There are cultural, like why some people are more vulnerable. So, well, we talk about willpower and the self. If you have a stronger self, then probably these things, you will find out a way to deal with the problem, because you have a mind that I have defined as a problem solving tool. So you can come out of the problem rather than doing some self harm. So there have been some studies, I think, brain imaging, but how do you study it? I mean, nobody would say that I am so suicidal, take me to a brain imaging experiment, after that I will kill myself. So that would be So we cannot study it except we know the after effects, and then we feel bad about it. I would say I keep talking to many, IITs, and I was in IIT Kanpur, and I heard that the day I arrived, a day before that, a student, unfortunately, a PhD student in chemistry, had committed suicide, and there was some candlelit, all that. So it occurred to me, why in IIT Kanpur, a person who has got admission, a chance to do PhD, would do this? And the same thing keep happening in multiple IITs and institutes in all. What can we do about it? Except we can do awareness campaigning, that understand yourself and don't be so tense, and don't be, etc. We can tighten the system. All that people are doing already. Measures are being taken. But if you are asking me a brain science question, and is there any way to predict? Of course, such a drastic decision cannot just be taken randomly. So you can identify attributes, and multiple experts can look at it. So awareness has to be based on this kind of evidence, like who appears to be uh, describing falsely the self. So I would philosophically approach it. When you no longer identify your motives with yourself, the meaninglessness of your existence is heightened. So Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk, I have read, so they would define that what holds you is yourself, is not the world. World will exist, was existing, will remain after you. Don't worry about it. As long as you are defining every day, waking up properly who you are, you will be alive. And don't think that something magnificent will happen through you. Hota hota nahi hota nahi hota. Just as some classical singer from Pakistan was once saying, I have been a listener. You can try. Ho jaye, na ho, na ho. Very few people achieve something significant that the society and they think is now legitimate. But majority of us have to just live. Life living is the biggest challenge. So why to end it or accidentally give it a wrong definition? So my personal view would be to enlighten and do awareness campaigning. We can study, of course, vulnerability as expressed in behavior. That's why we have clinical psychologists in the universities. But thing is that most students don't go, or there is no helpline. Helpline may be there, but there is no way really to predict it. Except philosophically, you can think, when does a person loses the conception of self, to the extent that losing it permanently would not bother. So I have, but it's like achieving a state of finality, that the world has lost meaning and I don't want to be an agent in this world. But this conception of agency was triggered even with your understanding, cultural understanding, and the stresses you encountered. अगर माँ बाप यहाँ बच्चों को बहुत कम करो, ये नहीं, ये नौकरी करना है, वो डिसिप्लिन ठीक है, ये नहीं होगा तो ये हो जाएगा, ये कंसेप्शन आएगा ही नहीं, तो आप अपने आप को मेजर नहीं करेंगे. उन पैरामीटर्स तो कल्चर दिया है ना, किसी और देश में जाइए कल्चर ही नहीं हुआ. So like in Finland, for example, which is the world's finest schooling system, हम कहते क्यों है? इसलिए कहते हैं because there is no pressure. They are going to school or they are learning for the sake of learning. But here it would be difficult to defend it. That are we in the college university for the sake of knowledge? I doubt so. Let's be frank about it.
Sir, as you pointed out, self and consciousness, I'm curious to know about, we have been evolving from just, as Charles Darwin said, the survival of the fittest. And we have been evolving from past millions of years, hundreds of centuries. And we have reached a point, like in past, people are concentrating upon how to succeed, how to find the things in the universe. But now we have changed drastically towards finding ways to get depressed and finding ways to get anger. So what is your take? Are we evolving in the backside, or what is the end of this?
Evolution neither had any meaning nor it has any meaning now. We are accidents of nature. We must not take ourselves seriously, if you really are asking me. But with this view, I cannot get down from your building and go to the university. I have to have a mechanical operational view, that I am a professor, I have a job over here, this is my goal. So we create goals for ourselves. Now some people do not create such goals. So what we have education, we have society, we have other help strategies. Sometimes these helps they are not sufficient. Now, currently why these things are coming to limelight a lot, because of also negative impact of some of the things we have. Social media has been accused because personification, unnecessary comparisons, or unnecessary activities have increased, are asking me. But with this view, I cannot get down from your building and go to the university. I have to have a mechanical operational view that I am a professor, I have a job over here, this is my goal. So we create goals for ourselves. Now, some people do not create such goals. So what we have education, we have society, we have other help strategies. Sometimes these helps they are not sufficient. Now, currently why these things are coming to limelight a lot, because of also negative impact of some of the things we have. Social media has been accused because personification, unnecessary comparisons, or unnecessary activities have increased. So now a lot of people are falling prey to this false depiction of the self. A lot of intellectuals are saying this. In what way social media is bad? Some people are saying it is not bad in itself, what you do on it or who you are. So then there are also stresses of life, employability, for third world countries at least, maybe in the first world countries. That is why the migration is such a big deal in Western Europe and America. If employability would not have been there, migrants have always gone. These countries are made by migrants. So why they are dancing around and winning elections on it? So interestingly, so stresses have gone up both in the economic, social, cultural domain. Now people also are affected by things that are so abstract. People are willing to kill themselves for things they have no business to deal with. Now, how do you convince such people that kindly mind your business, do study and get a job, and the traditional? So we have to revive traditionalism in order to bring down something that is not directly relevant. I am not saying we will not study or acquire knowledge, but we will not be so vague. Or younger people would not be, concrete in their ambitions. So we are not going back up front with regard to evolution. Evolution as a process, as Darwin has written and other people have added, is an ongoingness. It is both biological and physical. The universe is also expanding. We are also coming to know newer things about the universe. This galaxy, our location within the Milky Way, many new discoveries are coming. So we are also discovering about ourselves biologically, what we are coming every day to know, what else can we do. So far, things were limited. But now with the expansion of possibilities, some people find it very difficult to confront. And then there are peer pressures. So this leads to some kind of chaos. But I think we should not be demotivated. We should try to study as much as possible, but there is nothing like we will not know this. And there is nothing to be depressed, particularly with regard to our civilizations that have been holding the fort for 5,000 years. We have no reason to be depressed. So the Western mindset is different, the Eastern mindset is different. This is well established now. And I have been trained there. My colleagues are in the, I regularly have a good give and take with Western scholarship in my field. So I also hold the view that we have to look at ourselves. The civilizational response, what Carl Jung would have said, the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious of the East is holding us. There is a shroud on it. This has to be removed. So there is no shame in doing so. I am not politicking. Because the reasons why the shroud should not be removed have been commercial. Many a times I have said, cognitive science is a commercial discipline. It fractionates people with regard to their abilities. It merely at the end of the day can become a HR thing. Like if I give you a number, tomorrow if HR selects based on attention, I measure and give it to you. That's it then. It is not actually that. So we have come from a civilization where none of the measurements are even possible. We have defined everything differently. Asceticism. People can go about their lives without bothering about anything. So probably this tug of war between Western inspired ambitions and our own collective unconscious pull is leading us to be hesitant. So you can see therefore at the governmental level, at the policy level, a lot of changes are happening. There is a reason why these changes are happening. These are not certainly because of some party is particularly in power at a certain moment in time. These have to be looked from a very broad point of view, right? So this debate can go on. That are you trying to say that all the Western theories about mind, suicide, and they are? I'm not saying they are bad or good. Many of our scientists have been trained there. But thing is that I have to live in my culture. I have to be with my people. Their collective unconscious is what I encounter every day, not what Americans or Germans think. The point is that this is where the next years of research lies. That is it so that because I am going against this collective unconscious, I am unaware of the civilizational pull that is distinctly ours, and therefore I am behaving like I am a stranger. And that indifference is giving me the pain, which I am merely manifesting as a medical problem. To provide you a simple answer. Take a pill or listen to the podcast or go to a temple, or you can go to a temple or anywhere. We have been a multicultural civilization for so long as you can imagine. Yeah, Abrahamic religions came about 2000 years ago, but we have been there for so long. Now, cognitive science of religion is a tremendous field. So why cognitive scientists thought of studying religion? That is connected to that. Because whatever human beings have been doing, including pets, are in the purview of cognitive science. You just cannot tell that I won't touch it. It has to be in the center of it, right? No comments how many people or what kind of money got spent in Kumbh Mela. Anything human beings like and enjoy is part and parcel of cognitive science. Because if you make a difference between intelligent behavior and non-intelligent behavior, you are a first-rate racist. That is a big problem. I won't support that. I'll say that, okay, now you are pushing a universal idea. Now what is nice? I am rejecting this computational, reactive, straightforward weapon view of mind that has given you the commercial advantage. That's why we are considered good workers, but not good inventors. I mean, you can delete this later.
You delivered one TEDx talk, I mean, how to be a new you. I think his
Many years
question
ago.
partly, yeah. His question may be related to that in part.
So I always advise, which I practice also, our systems of strengthening the mind, making it continuously successful is fabulous. Yoga, meditation, kirtans, bhajans, any collective participation. Exercises in the gyms, going to a gym is a collective participation. It is not with equipment. You can do it yourself. But modern theories that are called social cognitive neuroscience theories of mind, they are essentially this. When we come in with other minds, we energize our own minds. So we have to find avenues to come in contact with other minds. So more isolation, more problem. And we have been collectivist cultures. इसीलिए लोगों को पार्क में जाके बैठना चाहिए, चलना चाहिए, कमेंट्री क्रिटिसिज्म कम करे और समझे पहले इतना लोग यहाँ इकट्ठा क्यों हुए हैं. Don't look at the surface, what they are doing. Deeply psychologically there is a need for them to be such. फिर आपकी सभी ईगो कंट्रोल में आ जाएगा. आप क्रिटिसाइज भी नहीं करेंगे. फिर आपको आप नहीं करिए, बट आपको अच्छा लगने लगेगा. The same approach we hold when we go to foreign countries and see alien cultures, people dancing, behaving in this way. If objectively I am merely a reporter, I am trying to write down, okay, in Times Square I saw so many people and this and that on Independence Day. But that's one aspect of knowing it. But I told you, what is the phenomenality of it? Natural to us. I have seen reports more recently, and people are inducing mind wandering in order to break them free and help them to think out of the box. So mind wandering is not such a bad thing. The point is, can you modulate between? Can you be so focused and intense that you are getting work done? That is called inhibitory control. And also you can allow mind wandering, which is a natural state of what we call the default mode network. The default state of us is to be in the world, not to know anything about it, finally. You can calm yourself with this thought. When you are hyper excited to pass a judgment, I am not here, really nobody bothers. The universe is indifferent, everybody else is indifferent, each brain mind is thinking about itself. I must be calm now. I think it can calm you down. So you don't need attention. Actually, in our tradition, attention was never considered a focusing device. I am slowly trying to read our stuff now that I know the problem. So attention is certainly not a beam like William James or other people thought. Our brains have evolved with the capacity to attend to things so as to acquire knowledge for survival need. Again, it's the evolutionary outcome. But we are also creatures that can do without this kind of attention. We can have more broad, diffused, phenomenal attention. That is probably better. Because in some mental illnesses or health conditions, this nature of attention changes. And randomness increases. Like in schizophrenia, for example, which is a serious condition, and it's a percentage in India is growing after diagnosis. One theory is that the delusions that happen in schizophrenia, there are cultural theories also, because in different cultures the nature of delusion differs. This randomness probably is a very evolutionary norm. It's just so that a lot of us have tightened ourselves so much that we view these delusions as something macabre or problem. But like their manifestations are probably happening more naturally. So because the mind lacks control, like what would happen in a normal person. So when you bring in control, these delusions go away. You don't hear voices and you are not pulled and pushed. So it's a matter of fluctuation of attentional state. So now there are more cognitive theories of schizophrenia than more psychological theories. So cognitive sciences are into this kind of serious questions. What does it mean really to entertain some sort of hallucination? What are they? Because behaviorally, though, we know the manifestations and the problems, but what exactly are the stimuli related problem? Why the brain is not able to handle crisscrossing ideas, and what is the nature of reality? Because most of us think that such people do not have contact with reality, but who knows? Again, you can always ask a question. The kind of reality that they are experiencing is something we have suppressed long ago. So psychiatrists are also looking at these conditions more holistically rather than drug treatment and bringing in traditional methods and so on. So
Is it not due to any malfunction in the brain?
there are, of course, clear indications that the control system of the brain gets slightly problematic, but with drugs you can slightly modify it, and exercises are prescribed so that you can bring in more control. But
what you said is fascinating. That they could be seeing what is maybe we are not seeing.
yeah, because at the end of the day, a person's a person's reality is that person's. So we cannot have a third person point of view. If you are talking about accommodating people who are deviant into a societal structure, then we are back to the early part of 19th century. That's what has been the issue. But you cannot. So we talk about management, more empathetic aspects, more inclusive treatments, rather than give drug, make him work, and let him go to office. No, we cannot do that now, because that has not been helpful. So in order to understand these complicated deviations, we have to understand also our opinions about it. So there is a lot of, that's why Nuance also has cognitive science, and they're the ones who have this doctors with MD specialization. So they're getting exposed to cognitive science, because that kind of interdisciplinarity will be helpful. Well, I just picked schizophrenia, but you have autism. You have many other conditions where we still really don't know. There are some popular theories like autistic children don't recognize emotions on the face, but more critics have been, well, that's not true. The kind of emotion they're recognizing is not the one you know. So you don't force the child to laugh or to dance around. So that just doesn't work. So there is a lot of counseling to parents who are having these children. Unfortunately, in our country, maybe we have not done much, I mean, in terms of basic research. But this remains a very important area.
What is your opinion on
Psychiatrists prescribing drugs for everything? Because I see there are diverse opinions there in the West.
Of course, I'm not an expert, but psychiatry or psychiatric pharmacology is a discipline where pharmacological treatment certainly, in most cases, deactivates certain hyperactive networks, or it kind of substitutes the chemicals. So a person achieves a degree of normalcy. But most psychiatrists who have studied and are well in touch with the recent developments would say that it itself is not enough. You have to add exercises, good food, more social cognition, more avenues for social cognition. Exclusion and stigma should not be there. Then it kind of helps in betterment. But certain conditions remain lifelong, and they may become worse also as you age. And we have not done in this country longitudinal studies. So per se, if somebody is showing, let's say, extreme states of hallucination and psychotic episodes, they need to be brought into medicals, and psychiatrists would give them drugs. But after the episode is over, the management of it has to be multidisciplinary. So there, the drug dependency is not a good idea, because then what would happen? Other associated problems will pop. So there we have to invest a lot of research money. What else can be done? Uh, how to make these people not so much drug dependent and functional, and expand their domains of activities, counsel people against stigma. Lots of societal problems are related to stigma, that human people think that well, a person is displaying this behavior, so may not be now useful, and etc. And certain laws of our country are also crafted that way, so as to, you know, help one party and not the other. So the problem is that we have to work a lot in all these domains, and it's just not scientists or scholars and bureaucrats, but I think politicians and whoever, we have to create awareness campaigns that mental illnesses will always remain, because they have evolved along with so-called normalcy of the brain. So if you have done fine with your so-called normalcy, now you take this as well, for which day all your technological advancement was coming. Are you talking only about the 20% able-bodied, nice, hyper-intelligent people that are working for Musk? No, we have to talk about everybody else. So then in that scenario, you have to look around you. Okay, what was our methods? How people were dealing with this problem few years ago? Now people are talking about telemedicine, AI. We have to look at them. Some of the famous doctors in the country are using them also. I keep seeing something. So I think pharmacological psychiatry, now computational psychiatry is there, cognitive psychiatry. So these all will keep evolving, because we are looking at the disorders and their manifestations differently, in a more nuanced and holistic sense. Before they were considered, just after Second World War, you must have seen this after Afghan and Iraq and PTSD post. This became a big problem in America. So a lot of policies, money, and, you know, accommodating people who have returned from war and all kinds of problems. Now they are looking at it differently. So in our country, we have a different kind of issue. We have mental illnesses, the percentage vary, but we have less number of psychiatrists per 1,000 people, very, very few in India. So we have to increase that number. And I think the number of specialization psychiatrists study when they do their MD, they have to probably study new things about the mind, not just focus on the drugs. Because people develop drug resistance, as commonly you would know. So when you develop drug resistance and you do not know any other ways of therapy, and a person is not able to comply, then what do you do? So drug resistance is another big problem. In some people it works, but in other people, after a couple of months, 1 year, then they also have this byproduct, other problems. So it's a complicated area. I'm not an expert to talk about it, but whatever I told you is from my discussions or my readings, because in most journals like Brain and uh, there is a journal of schizophrenia research, their most prestigious journal. I find a lot of cognitive science type articles there actually. So it's an interdisciplinary field now.
So I think dreams are a complex area that people are still trying to figure out, right? So as far as I know, dreams are partly because of conscious and subconscious mind, and then this lucid dreaming, questioning all our understanding about dreams and all. So how do you explain these concepts?
Well, I'm not an expert again on dreams, but I have read, like everybody else, Freud's and Carl Jung's and other psychoanalysts work on dreams, but they did link first dreams to awareness and how interpretation of dreams can. But I also have read works by neurologist, American neurologist at Harvard Medical School, who did the neurophysiological experiments on dream states. So he found out that dreaming is very normal, natural, uh, and the brain is active differently during dreaming. So I'm not sure whether dreams are used as useful tool in cognitive science, really, except in the domain of psychoanalysis, because we have claimed this to be a rational science. So we don't study people when they're sleeping because it is not ethical. So as a scholar, I mean, in cognitive science, I won't say that okay, dreams are this and that, and if you believe in them or if you have seen a dream, then this is what Freud would have done. So we have come a long way, because the dreams actually do reflect reality or not is another question, whether people dream things related to their lives. But dreams, if studied properly, can reveal all this Jungian type of collective unconscious, that if dreams are analyzed. So you can only follow the psychoanalytical tools. In brain mind sciences, I'm not sure that people are seriously looking at it. So
So you work in the areas of attention and consciousness, right? So are they interdependent or do they operate?
that's a good question. I have written a little bit on it. One theory is that you need attention to be conscious. Like I have to attend to be conscious of it, to reach a reportable state, knowledge state. Other theories believe that consciousness operates without attention, with a state like awareness. You are vaguely aware, but you are not really attending. That's conscious enough. So it keeps fluctuating. So we have groups of people who buy either one of these theories. A big question in the field is, do you need attention to be conscious? I fundamentally don't believe that. So I would say that it's a different problem altogether. Attention gives you objective knowledge about a thing for some time or whatever. But a state of consciousness and many versions of it are natural to living organisms, most particularly self consciousness. But then there is something called critical reflectability. Like I can reflect on my self consciousness. Now people would say, do you need attention for that? Like, where are you thinking about yourself in last 30 minutes or when I asked you? For that means you can internally channelize your attention and then boost up your self consciousness, which otherwise was kind of hidden. You were not thinking, other things was on your mind. So yeah, I mean, it's debatable.
So my question is, to what extent does our brain influence the person we become?
Okay, I think somewhere in last 1 hour, a bit related to that I have said, if people's behavior are just what's going on in their brain, like moment by moment, matter would be solved. But that's not how it is. So brain processes are not behaviors or who you think you are, or the activities. That's the big gulf. Otherwise, it would be very easy to solve a lot of problems, right? So your biological system gives you certain possibilities, like you have language, you have memory, you have attention. What Chomsky would say, competence, a basic biological endowment. Like as a human being or a member of the species, you have these things, right? If your brain is not like faulty and you have no problem, but what you do with the brain is acculturation. Is what is because of your membership to other human beings in a certain culture, right? So if that's not happening, basic biology is not going to do much. So we need to be very clear when we are trying to boost our brain only in isolation. I won't support that. I said, then you are misunderstanding about it. It's
To rephrase that
yeah.
question.
Suppose we keep on suggesting, think positive, people say, so I think positive. Does it rewire the brain?
All right. All right. Why? Let's ask this question. Why people read how-to books, these self-help books? Why people are listening to podcasts? Why people are following a lot of people? The reason is that they amplify certain activity in the brain, certainly, particularly the amygdala, the insula, the affective areas, so that they're boosted up. So you have an alter image projected. I can do that. So whatever you are reading, you are mimicking. And then for a moment or some time, you think that, oh, you feel positive. Certainly something is happening. The same thing probably happens when you consume alcohol. You feel great about yourself. Things you could not have said, you start rephrasing, and you feel great with other people's company in a range of things, playing sports. So suggestion work. That's why I told you our minds and brains are not our own. They are invisibly networked with all the brains and minds, 8 billion brains right now on this planet. There is an invisible wire. That's why we are affected. What's going on with other people's life in Gaza? Otherwise, we would not have bothered. The street dogs that are in my colony are not bothered. What's going on in other colony street dogs? I mean, that's a bad example. Why are we bothered? Why we make our policies? Because we are. That's if my mind would have been just my mind, insulated from all of this, I would have done anything with it. Well, it seems to me that the content of my minds are not at all mine. It also frees me from taking big responsibility. So how social cognition works, how human beings think about other human beings, planning policies and assigning, allocating resources, is because they think that we have evolved to be such that we find our alliances with other minds without being fiber networked. Like we can feel the pain of people that are going through some experiences, and we can consume ourselves with that.
So you also spoke about PTSD, right? Now, what actually happens like when I read that when you have maybe brain injury or trauma or something, people sort of wake up in foreign accent syndrome or foreign language syndrome. They wake up and start speaking either a different language in the case of foreign language syndrome, or they wake up and start speaking an accent. I mean, they would have never learned the language. They would have never been familiar with that. But how does that happen?
See, it's a mysterious organ. Some certain accidental connections, bad connections, can lead to these symptoms, but not necessarily they will stay. They don't become part of the behavior. That's why quickly they're diagnosed as, okay, this is a bit. So sudden changes in people's ideology to exposure to a problem. This is happening now. So you see a war between two countries and something, you feel very distressed and you are doing something about it. You are writing a message or you are putting a post. Sudden distress. 2 days before you were not this activist.
Right.
So it can, foreign language syndrome is a typical thing, but I am taking what happens when we encounter cultures and accents and phenomena with which we don't agree, and it surprises us. The brain has to adapt to it. That's why there is a good way of adapting, there is a bad way of adapting. Or I would say more pragmatic, natural way of adapting. But unnaturality also happens when you resist too much and you try to change something, and then there are problems, right? It ends up in psychopathology. So if you read Eric Fromm or other psychologists that actually studied Auschwitz, people who lived through Holocaust and came out of it, and they have narrated, and it's a big area of interest now, that not what Nazis did, but what happened to people who survived it. So some of the greatest ideas have come that human beings can endure anything. This gives a lot of strength. So if it's who caused the misery to whom is one thing. You can be eternally in regret and doomed like the Germans, like in the more recent German elections. AFD won because Germans are so guilt-ridden that, interestingly, AFD has won most seats from East Germany. Now, East Germans were socialists or communists. So now I analyzed in the morning, socialists and communists have become the fascists? How? In New York Times today. Now the question is, no, long-running suffering, misconceptions, misunderstandings have led to this outcome. You can't straight away connect it. That all East Germans don't like illegal immigrants, so they have voted to AFD. This question of Germany. The question is, how are we adapting again to contingencies? A lot of soldiers are in the warfield. A lot of our people are deployed in sensitive operations. Every day they are surprised. But some people will not be coping. We also have instances where people behave a bit differently and they are pulled out. They are offered psychiatric treatment. This also happens. So, foreign language syndrome or not, I think some of these things were in the textbook, but now we don't refer to these things so much. We have moved on from this categorical leveled things. Yeah.
So asking out of curiosity that I don't know if it is true or not, but it is said that humans use less than 10% of the brain, and Einstein has used little more further. Do you think that is it possible to use 100% of the brain? And spiritual gurus say that they sense beyond things. Are they using 100% of the brain, or is it a myth?
So I won't say 100%, 10%. I don't know how much I am using or how much I used in talking to all of you. Well, this is again heresy, or I would say broadly popular ways of talking about the brain, not very scientific. So there's a lot of thing there. I won't comment on anyone or anybody. Just like you are exposed to everything, I too am consuming those very same stuff. I have my own opinions. Brain is the last frontier, is the most mysterious thing. Probably people would say it's the even more mysterious than the entire cosmos. Yeah, because it is interpreting things and giving us all this feedback that otherwise would not bother. Imagine, there's a technique called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. So what happens? I can pass very feeble current and suspend your brain activity for some time and study it. So let's say I apply TMS to most human beings on the planet now for 30 minutes. Their brains are not working in that sense. They're suspended, frozen. Would I say all consciousness, phenomenality, reality vanished from the earth for 30 minutes? Actually, I'm right. Then I bring back. TMS is over. All drama unfolds. Trump is president and Israel. Every drama unfolds. Sentences are popping. Again, I do the same experiment after 30 minutes. Give TMS. I mean, I'm not playing God, but I'm saying this way, if you imagine at humanity, you would arrive at this. There is nothing like 10% or 50%. The question is, what are we doing with our brains? Whatever it is or it is not. People with so-called high intelligence are the biggest troublemakers, right? You would have known that some of the serial killers have the highest intelligence. So there is no such correlation. We know nothing about boosting it either. So most of those things are non-scientific. Let's not go there. They are traditional but not scientific. There is not, on faith you can do. Let's not now bring that argument here. If you ask me, do you certainly think that if I do this in 30 days, my ability to use my brain will go from 10 to 25? I'll say as of now, as of today, I don't know. There is nothing supported by science. Yeah, your brain is doing what you are adapting to. The challenges of the environment. If you go to environment more challenge, your brain has the potential to adapt differently. So we have to create the environment as more challenging. Rather than without the challenge in the environment, your brain will automatically create all this. No. So yeah, I mean, more or less that is the answer.
So, can I say this that the health drinks the people are selling and those are they say that they'll increase the intelligence also. So it's not a valid point.
See, we in India we have to battle on multiple fronts. You might think of me up 30-40 minutes ago. I said I am very big fan of traditional knowledge. I am, but I am not fan of everything that is happening in its name. There are things that need to be observed, studied, replicated. Clinical trials, we don't do many clinical trials. So heresy and all that is not good. Well, you may say in America also things are happening. It is happening. That's why our battle is with the entire humanity, not in this country or that country. So there is nowhere really. What is looking like is there are some brain training methods. They could be traditional yoga meditation. They could be more scientific like video game playing. But again, they are debatable. So we don't know for sure. It may work for somebody. It may not work for another person. So for whom it has worked, for other reasons. And I would say on a lighter note, we have enough brain capacity. Most problems are because of that. So there's nothing like we have to enhance it.
So, how do you see cognitive science would be seen over the next 20 years? Because there is also increasing dependency on AI right now. So, how do you think, how would it be taken over the next 20 years?
20 is a long time.
Or, okay, that's it.
You mean in India? in this country, in our country?
Yeah, in India or
Okay,
or
I am expecting a couple of things. First is that AI would be used as a business tool more than as a fundamental deep research territory. Fear is that Indians are not good at that. Everything we look for is how to quickly use it for a solution. So, a business utility tool. Americans do not have that in their mind. So, we have to now change our mindset to do AI research rather than AI is a tool. वो हमसे बढ़िया कर लेंगे और हमको उनका काम करना पड़ेगा. हम नहीं चाहेंगे उस डायरेक्शन में हम जाए. ये पहली बात. डीप रिसर्च की जरूरत है. गवर्नमेंट हैज नाउ क्रिएट सैंक्शन AI excellence hubs where researchers would be funded to do AI research. AI is not going to penetrate most aspects of Indian life because there are cultural resistances. We have 40% people illiterate, or they are not formally illiterate. So AI is not going to be any use to them. We have to also look at policies. We cannot keep people unemployed in the name of AI. Imagine Hyderabad airport. If we fully automatize and everything is AI, how many people are going to work there? I pass by to my flight and without there is no human being needed. That is possible actually. But would we like that? Would we go for that model? So we have to be practical and ethical when we talk about AI and real world solutions, at least in this country.
I have a question for you. So how it started was the talk with philosophy. So I think Descartes' cogito ergo sum. I would say that I personally believe dubito ergo sum. I doubt, therefore I am. So I have one big doubt. So cognitive sciences, but the more the conversation had come over philosophy. So when the word science comes in, so does it subverts the concept of philosophy, or how do you identify yourself? Do you think of yourself as a scientific philosopher, or do you think that empiricism is more stronger than philosophy? What do you think?
Well, I have also been teaching philosophy of mind to master's students over here, and I do work on retention and more concrete. I think that, I can define myself as a person interested in couple of things, and I also do some experiments time to time. So I'm not an empirical person in that sense that I won't believe in any metaphysical curiosity that my mind is entertaining, or I think this is some old style. Rather, I read a lot of philosophy, art history, and literature, and then create my problems concerning the mind. Because I fundamentally believe that the problems of cognitions are not some minor problems. So, just to answer you, as I have said, a metaphysical curiosity is first and foremost the vocation. Then comes the real world solutions to it. So, you can do laboratory based research, you can do more qualitative research. Many people do many types of research. Neuroscientists follow a more biological model, but there are also neuroscientists who are philosophically far more aware because they create their research problems from a philosophical point of view. For example, the question of first person versus third person consciousness. This is a philosophical problem. You may find a corresponding brain area or not. If you don't find, fine, the problem does not disappear. So it's a false dichotomy. Let me tell you, post-enlightenment, if you have read more recently, people have been writing in periodicals such as the London Review of Book and New York Review of Books. I have been addicted in reading some of this from pretty early days of my students. So, a long format essays are written there. So, if some of the best intellectuals write over there and on one another, like Thomas Nagel would write often. The one article more recently was on whether so it was not in LRB, it was in Aeon. There is an online Aeon. Post-enlightenment ideas of science could be a hoax, an oversold concept itself to be questioned. That its rationality is the ultimate rationality that we all should feel for. And Karl Popper and other philosophers of science hyped it. I'm not questioning the 20th century history, but the Enlightenment paradigm vis-a-vis scientific temper is to be questioned itself, because it is coming in the way of us trying to really understand ourselves and the world the way we should understand. That's why this reluctance, this hesitation, this lack of ungrounded, this feeling of ungroundedness when you are trying to look at your own culture. Now, we have not been very scientific. Europeans have been very scientific since 16th century. That's the problem, because it has been drilled into our heads that you need to find objective evidence for everything. Otherwise, you are mystical, you are spiritual, you do not know. So, empiricism itself is just not finding so-called this kind of evidence. You can be also a philosopher with thought experiments and you are empirical. It is not necessary to define empiricism only with regard to traditional scientificism. While I fully subscribe that for a syllabus or a course or a particular end in mind, but as a broad intellectual question, I think the scientific enlightenment or scientific temper. That's why Thomas Nagel wrote a book 2-3 years ago, and he proposed that we need to wait for another scientific revolution. The 16th century revolution was not enough, it gave us what it has to give. Now, if we want to solve the question of mind and consciousness and etc., we need to wait for another revolution. Now, what was his point in that revolution? That revolution will have to tackle the problems traditional scientificism has given us. It has made us more narrower. It has made us incompatible with our basic intuitions, because we are questioning our intuitions, and it has created other problems as well, particularly for mind, particularly for problems, philosophical problems concerning consciousness and mind. Another revolution is underway. That is the revolution of this multidisciplinarity. So there is no acceptance of only one mode of inquiry, which we had from Bacon and from the early days of empiricism from Hume. That's our past. But now we have evolved to appreciate that past or to move on. So we are not rejecting the temperament that we inherited because of a 16th century revolution in Europe. We have had our revolutions as well over here and in many other countries, right? For example, if you in China, I was in China for some time, there is a resurrection of Confucian thought and Lao's thoughts. Now, China is a socialist but capitalist country, far richer than us and doing everything very fine. It's selling aircrafts and cars. Now, why China needs Confucius and Lao Tse? Because they have to remain grounded. So they just can't vouch upon. They look at science as a technique to weaponize capitalism, but they don't want to forget who they are. So there is enormous emphasis on training and discussion of their own philosophical attitudes, so as to bring order to society and so as to minimize some of these problems that we talked earlier about, so that people don't just think a failure to find objective explanations would be an utter failure in some existence itself. So I think I like that kind of approach. So you can be empirical. That's the question for neuroscience. There were a lot of debates whether neuroscience will end psychology. The Patricia and Paul Churchland were of that sort. That neurophilosophy, like, there's no need to talk about psychology, but I think it is totally misguided. It is utterly misguided. It was called an approach that would completely end psychology, because they went all after this biological model. I think we just discuss it because it's in the textbook, but nobody values it. So we know that just an empirical investigation is not sufficient. Maybe in some, like in physical sciences or in more traditional sciences, but not certainly for this kind of questions. Like, you cannot understand faith, belief and religions with the empirical method. So personally, my take is that I am multidisciplinary in the sense that I know the vagueness, the metaphysical troubles of this discipline. For everyday practice, talking to students in a limited number of time, writing a paper that is 3,000 words, all this cannot come. For that, I have to write books and have long format discussions, right? Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So the second part of question, I think I just amalgamated it all. But when you were a student just into college, linguistics was your subject. So how did you get acquainted with, say, cognitive science, and how did you dive into it?
Well, I was in Delhi University in 1996. There was no cognitive science at that time. And linguistics was a new subject to me. And what triggered, I think, my interest in intellectual disciplines was reading different things in the library. So I got exposed to philosophy books in the Delhi University Library. I got interested in at that time in reading certain journals and periodicals and linguistics and more. I was reading also Marxist sociology because Delhi University was a vibrant place. We had Andrei Betaye and many. So I think I enjoyed those couple of years, and that my my professor probably even who is still active, and we just had a conference in IIT Kanpur last year, and we are meeting. I'm going to Delhi tomorrow. We are doing a conference or a workshop in IIT Delhi. So I am in touch with him. Thing is that my intellectual upbringing was a result of reading anything and everything I liked. Much later, the word cognitive science I encountered in Europe. And then when I came to India, as I told you, there was an institute whose name had cognitive science. Even then, I didn't know. I was doing my own thing. I was interested in a couple of things. I narrowed down it when I identified the discipline, the journals, what to do on an everyday basis. So I think I have been a voracious reader. Even I still do the same things, irrespective of the discipline. I take great interest in art and literature because you cannot have a fertile mind to solve questions pertaining to the psyche without that kind of imagination. And I do empirical research with my students. So I think it has been a long moving around through various and more professionally in the last 20 years. I have been also happy. I have been lucky to have worked with some of the best minds in the world. I have written papers with them, and I still work and visit them regularly. So they all also have changed like me. So nobody has remained stuck. So they all came from multiple fields, particularly non-linear fields. Like somebody has studied like biology and then moved on to like I studied various things. So I think the non-linearity and an interest in vague things, I would say, or and then I always said that luckily there was a discipline in India. Like I could not have been a good linguist. So cognitive science was the proper place for me. I could not have been a proper, well, might have been a psycholinguist, but then within linguistics you have other things that are more lucrative like syntax. So I think this field was made for me, and I found that okay, I can teach philosophy of mind, I can teach attention. Where can you teach like this? You go to chemistry department, everybody is teaching some chemistry. So it's totally like homogeneous, right? Heterogeneity, but within massive homogeneity. But here I can more or less be interested in the question of uh, neuroscience in art. I can start a research project. Somebody can give me, I can talk about our dreams. So I can talk about language. So I think I was of that type, and I would like to remain so.
Thank you, sir.
Did you do your work on, say, languages, right? The being bilingual, conversation of one.
Yeah.
It was also affected by the problem of replication. Right? Certain
Yeah.
empirical was how. When did this happen?
No, I mean, there was this big movement that bilinguals are better than monolinguals, and Elaine Bialystock, Canadian psychologist, and many others started that. I also produced some early work claiming in India that high proficient English speakers are better in cognitive tasks. I wrote a monograph few years ago capsulating that idea. But replication crisis happened all over psychology, not in this field. There were cultural methodological issues. The field itself had to be replicated because most people had studied only English based bilingual students. So there were no studies from Asia. When studies came and they themselves replicated, they found out that they are not getting the results. So currently the state is that we are redefining the field's goals. Nobody is saying that bilinguals are better than monolinguals. We are saying bilinguals adapt to environmental problems differently than monolinguals. Their attention strategies may be different. I am developing a model now based on diversity, um, which has some bilingualism angle to it. So I am basically proposing that given cultural constraints, people are sensitive to diversity differently, and that you see as a reflection in bilingualism. So there is no inherent relationship between speaking two languages and being smart. That idea is certainly wrong.
But it confers some advantage.
Yeah, even if it confers, could be in the domain of social cognition. Naturally, because as a bilingual, you can talk to more people, you can read, if you are biliterate, you can read more books in that way. But your attention in some domain might be a bit better, like social attention. But if you're talking about some reactive attention, cognitive control, then we have to define this, because we still don't understand cognitive control properly. So, except in psychological tasks. So, current argument is we don't claim a clear advantage, because there are immigrants also who are coming into countries, and they are not as such bilingual. There is hesitancy on both sides learning another's language. So, we should say bilingualism is a unique adaptation of the human mind, that it got the formatting necessary for housing two languages. In no other creatures we see that they learn one another's communication. But what it has given us is excellent social advantages and economic advantages, cultural advantages. As far as mind and its core functions are concerned, we have to be a bit careful to what extent we draw the correlation. I personally have been saying that certain aspects of social cognition and attention are modulated in those who are actual practitioners of bilingualism, because most people claim to be bilingual, they hardly speak the other language. They are dominant in one language. If they are not experiencing bilingualism, then social cognition, social networks, other things are remaining constant. So there are lots of methodological issues. Research is underway. I am the editorial board member of the most important journal of that area, Cambridge University Press, Bilingualism, Language Cognition. So where we regularly publish this from both sides, these issues. And it is vital for Indians, because we have not only many languages, we have many dialects. And we also have people that are not formally literate, but excellent speakers of multiple languages. So these issues need to be researched properly. We have studied only student populations, and they are dominant in English, as you know, in India. So we have to slightly reformat our questions and experience bilingualism, not English-based bilingualism, but bilingualism in other multiple languages. So, for example, I keep professing on this. Ask, okay, have you learned Telugu? You have been here for last. I said, no, I have not learned. You are giving me big model sensitivity of the mind theories. I say, yeah, sometimes the theoretician is not the practitioner. मैं काम चला लेता हूँ. अभी वही बात है, जरूरत नहीं पड़ी तो हम लोग रिवर्स सेंट्रिक एनिमल है. अब जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी तो नहीं सीखेंगे. फिर भी for the sake of theory, I think human beings are certainly capable of learning one other's languages, and if you learn, it is economically, socially profiting, and it can change your brain in that sense. It's this way around. It is no, it's not. I mean, that is a chicken and egg problem. Whether smarter people are better bilinguals or better bilingualism makes people smarter. So I still don't know the answer to that.
Transferable or
Pardon me?
say if you learn Telugu, you gain some skills transferable to some other domain.
See, let's imagine if I learn good Telugu, I would enhance my social network. I will have, from theory of mind, others' mental content coming into me when I talk in their language, because now they are translating. That would strengthen my brain networks. I would energize my working memory, because I would remember more words, exercising the mind to retrieve words. So I think in that sense, practically it is possible if I learn Telugu and become a proficient speaker in 1 year or 2 years' time. So these studies have happened with foreign language learning. Wow, people who acquire a foreign language or immersion, like many American students go to Spain and some country to spend 6 months. We also, in our university, we have a program where foreign students come and stay for 6 months. Well, I have not studied them, but do they pick up any Hindi or any Urdu or Hyderabadi? I really don't know. That is very. Do they show any sensitivity, or they manage with their English? And because most students speak English to them, so what is there is no lingua franca scarcity. So on the question whether bi-multilingualism good for the brain, my colleagues in this country, there are neurologists who firmly believe that, but I think my views are changing and I'm writing constantly about it. So I am not, I often tell to people, read my older papers with skepticism. Do not, yeah, they don't hold true today. No, you had said, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Professor. It has been a very fascinating discussion.
Thank you.